And now we're starting Daf Mem Hey, and the Gemara wants to know why Rabbi Shimon doesn't darshan the Vav V'Shovtecha to jack up the number of Dayanim required for Eglah Rufa from 3 to 5. And the Gemara answers Vav, the Vav V'Shovtecha lo mashmale. He doesn't think that it's a ribui to add and justify that we require 2 extra Dayanim. So now the Gemara raises a question on both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon Elamiyata. If from the words Zkenecha v'Shovtecha we derive the number of Dayanim that we need for the Medida, then we have to raise the following question: Bein l'Rabbi Yehuda, Bein l'Rabbi Shimon, that we can be marbe for the Lashon HaKosuv 4 Dayanim no safek. If we want to be consistent, let's add another 4 Dayanim. And why is that? Because the pasuk says v'yotzu Zkenecha v'Shovtecha u'modedu es ha'orim asher svivos hacholol. So the word v'yotzu in plural indicates shnayim, and then it says u'modedu to measure, and that also is in a plural at each shnayim. And therefore the Rabbi Yehuda, who requires 5, we have another 2 times 2 is 4 plus 5 is 9 Rekan Tisha. With Rabbi Shimon, he requires 3 Dayanim. Why doesn't he add another 4? And 4 plus 3 is 7. And where it says we need v'yatzu b'madu l'tisanya to derive a different din that is derived in the brisa, not to derive an extra minyan hadayanim, and that is v'yatzu hein v'lo shluchein. The dayanim themselves have to go down to the Nachal to do the Medida, and they cannot send any messengers, any proxies. And umadadu shafilu nimtza ba'alil la'ir hayumodadu. Even if it's simple, it's very clear where the closest city is, they still require Medida. She mitzvah lasok b'Medida. There's an unconditional mitzvah to dedicate a process of Medida. And therefore, we need the psukim of v'yatzu hein v'lo shulcheim umadadu afilu nimtza ba'alil ba'ir, and therefore we stick to 3 and 5 dayanim. We don't jack up the numbers. Masnisin, the lo ki Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the Mishnah that establishes that the Sanhedrin has to go to the makom, to the place where the dead slain body is. No mention of the Melech, no mention of the Kohen Gadol. They can stay wherever they are. The Sanya, we say Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that Zkenecha zu Sanhedrin, Shovtecha ze Melech v'Kohen Gadol. According to the Shita Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, it's not enough that the Zkedim go down to the place where the Chalol is located, but they need also that the Melech and the Kohen Gadol have to go down there in order to do the Medida. And again, I'm not sure what a Melech means. The Melech could mean me Malchus Beis David, or it could mean a Melech B'Yisrael. But whatever it is, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov requires the Melech and the Kohen Gadol. They're all the happy, entourage here to do the Medida. Melech, how do we know that Melech is included on the word Shovtecha? Dichsiv, a pasuk in the 29th chapter of Mishlei, Melech b'mishpat yamid eretz. And the word mishpat refers to the Melech. And Kohen Gadol, he's also considered Shovtecha. Dichsiv, in Parsas Shoftim, it says, Ubas al hakonim halavim ve'el hashofet asher yeh bayomim ahem. So we see that the Kohen Gadol is considered a shofet. And what gives him the status of a shofet? Apparently because he's in charge of all the other Kohanim. That's what makes him the Kohen Gadol. He's called in the Torah shofet. Iboilu, the Gemara vacillates, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov b'melech Kohen hu depoli, is his debate against the Chachamim only with regard to the Melech and the Kohen Gadol. Abel b'Sanhedri, but he definitely requires a Sanhedrin in addition to the Melech and the Kohen Gadol. Ikrab Yehuda, 5 members of Sanhedrin. Ikrab Shimon, 3 members of Sanhedrin. Svirale, Odil b'Sanhedri nami polik. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov substitutes the Melech and the Kohen Gadol for the minyan of Sanhedrin. And what does that mean for the minyan of Sanhedrin? We want to know whether or not he has these words to indicate, like, for example, Shoftecha, the number of Dayanim we need. And if Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov needs the word Shoftecha for the Melech and the Kohen Gadol, then he doesn't have that pasuk Shoftecha to limit the number of the minyan of Sanhedrin that has to be down there for Medida. And therefore, the final conclusion of this side in the Gemara Suffolk is Ha'de'ika Kula Sanhedrin. According to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, we need the entire Sanhedrin plus the Melech, plus the Kohen Gadol. Amar Rabbi Yosef Tashma, I'm going to tell you, going to bring to you a proof from a Brisa, Mitzon Zaken Mamre. If the Chachmei Sanhedrin of the High Court of Israel find the Zaken Mamre who rebels against them outside of the area of the Beis Hamikdash on the Har Bayis, beyond the Lishkas Hagozis, and where do they meet up with this Zaken Mamre b'Makom, a place that's called Abei Pagi. So Abei Pagi is within the walls of Yerushalayim, but it's not in the Lishkas Hagozis, which is on the Har Bayis. So the question was raised whether or not the din requires that the Zakeh, that scholar who rejects the decision handed down by the Bezna Gadol and he becomes a Zaken Mamre, what if he was asked that question and he was nowhere near the Lishkas Hagozis? He was Abei Pagi. And then after he gave his decision, dissenting against the decision of Sanhedrin, Himra Alehem, now he goes back to his city and he insists on his Horah after they ask him, and his verdict and his view, despite the fact that the Sanhedrin came up with another view. So basically he's being Mamre PM Shel Bezna Gadol, Yachol Tiyeh Hamra Asa Amra. I would think that his rebellion is a rebellion because he's rejecting the words of the Sanhedrin in their Horah. Now their Horah was Shalom B'Makom Moshav Sanhedrin. If they were outside the Lishkas Hagozis, then he, the Zaken Mamre, in order to be Chayiv, can also, he doesn't have to be in the Lishkas Hagozis. He can also be outside the Lishkas Hagozis. And if we condemn him as a Zaken Mamre, he's Chayiv Chenek. Talmud Lomar, in the Parsha of Zaken Mamre, it says, V'kamto ve'olisa la'mokom, melamed sham mokom gorim. So it's got to be a mokom amyuchad l'moshav Sanhedrin that's in the Lishkas Hagozis, and that would generate a din of Zaken Mamre, and he's Chayiv Chenek. But if he finds them outside of the Lishkas Hagozis, and that's where somebody came up with a question, and the Sanhedrin issued a verdict, and he now rejects the decision of the Sanhedrin, he doesn't have a din of Zaken Mamre, because he found them outside of Lishkas Hagozis, and the Torah says, "V'kamta v'lisa al mokom melamed shamokom gorim." The Nafal Kama, when we say that he found the Sanhedrin outside of Lishkas Hagozis in the Beis Pagi, how many members of the Sanhedrin already left the Lishkas Hagozis? If only a minority of the Dayanim left the Lishkas Hagozis, well, why don't we say that maybe it's possible that those Dayanim that remained in the Lishkas Hagozis and he didn't ask them their opinion, maybe they would possibly agree with his opinion. So therefore, he's not rejecting the view or the decision handed down by the Bezdin. So we don't need a drasha from the Brisa of Kamtov Alisa to exclude a case where a miktas of the Dayanim left the Lishkas HaGazos. That's obvious. El Pshita Denofa Kulu. The drasha could only be justified if the entire Sanhedrin, every last member, left the Lishkas HaGazos. And the Brisa says that even when the Zaken rebels and rejects the decision of the entire Sanhedrin, he does not become a Zaken Mamre. Why? Because the psak of the Bezdin was not issued in the Makom, which is the Lishkas HaGazos, the Makom HaMiyuchad L'Sanhedrin. HaMakom Goren. Okay, so what does this have to do with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? I mean, Rav Yosef is quoting this whole beautiful discussion here about Zokin Mamre, but we want to know, what is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? Does he require Sanhedrin for the Eglah Rufa? So now the Gemara tells us what it's all about. Ulamai, why did the Chachamim of the Sanhedrin up and leave the Lishkas HaGazos? Ilidvar Rishus, if they had business dealings, Mi Matzu Nafke, Haksiv, the Pasuk says in Shir Ashir Perek Zayin, Shalarech Agan Asar, Al Yefsar HaMozek. So just 1 second. One second, I'm sorry, I have the English translation. One of those rare occasions that I happen to have the English translation. So now we have something called Sararech. And then we have Agan Asar. Very difficult pasuk here. Sararech is a navel. And, you know, the entire Shir Hashirim is a metaphor for Klal Yisrael and the beauty of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so now what do we have? We have Agan Asar is a moon-shaped basin. So we're talking about, as he points out here in the footnote number 17, a blend of wine and water. The wines of ancient times were very strong, had to be diluted. And it was 2 parts water to 1 wine. So what is Al Yechsar HaMozeg? Let not the strength of the blend be lacking. Do not dilute your wine so heavily that less than 1/3 of the mixture is wine. And this is an allegory. And it refers to the great Sanhedrin. Sararech, your navel, refers to the chamber of hewn stone, which is called the Lishkas HaGozis. And that was located at the navel. The navel is the center of Eretz Yisrael. Agan Asar, the moon-shaped basin, refers to the Sanhedrin, because the members of the Sanhedrin sat in a semicircle. Sorry. So it says the following, that the members of the Sanhedrin apparently cannot all just pack out. But just like we had that ratio, you remember, between the water and the wine of 1-3, so make sure that at least 1/3 of the Sanhedrin, which would be 23 of 71 judges, are always present in the Lishkas HaGozis. So therefore, it can't be that they all left, because that's against the law. If one of the members of Sanhedrin has to leave the Lishkas HaGozis, in Yesham Esrim Ushlosha Keneged Sanhedrin Ktana Yotze. In other words, they have to leave a minimum of 1/3 behind, which we said was 23 judges. And by the way, the number 23 is Keneged Sanhedrin Ktana, the Imlav and Yotze. So it's impossible that the entire Sanhedrin would have left the Lishkas HaGozis. Ela Pshita L'dvar mitzvah. But let's say there was a mitzvah to perform, and they had to perform that mitzvah in their capacity as the Sanhedrin. That's why they all packed out, and therefore there was no chiyuv of the Zaken Mamre. But Lamai, what mitzvah would require that the entire Sanhedrin would evacuate the Lishkas HaGozis? Lav L'Medina Sa'egla. The only thing that we can suggest is that we have to measure the Egla Rufa, and we need the entire Sanhedrin. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So it means that according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, in addition to the Kohen and the Kohen Gadol and the Melech, we need the entire Sanhedrin to be part of this Medida. Every last member of the Sanhedrin. Abaye says this is not a proof. Look. There's another mitzvah which requires the Sanhedrin to operate outside of the Lishkas HaGozis, specifically in their capacity as the Sanhedrin. And that's called Lahosif al Ha'ir v'al Hazoros. Now I think this is going to be Masechet Shavuos. Let's see if I'm right. Kedisnan, like we learned. Let's see if he tells you where the Mishnah is. Dalid. Yeah, Mishnah's in Shavuos. Ein mosifin al ir v'al hazoros el bezdin shel shivim v'echad. So obviously they're going out of the Lishkas HaGozis in order to expand the city of Yerushalayim or the Chatzer or the Azara. So you can't prove from here that if all the members of Sanhedrin were in base Pagi outside the Lishkas HaGozis, they did it because they were required to do a Medida of Egla Rufa according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But Tanya Kavase de Rav Yosef, nevertheless, we have a brisa that clearly supports Rav Yosef. Because the brisa says, Mitzona base Pagi vehimra alehem, supposing the Zakei Mamre found the Sanhedrin at base Pagi outside of the Lishkas HaGozis, and there he rejected their decision. Kigon sheyotzel medidas egla. They all went out of the Lishkas HaGozis in order to measure the Egla Rufa. Or lahosif al ir al azara. So we have two possibilities. Is Yochel Tehei Amrosa Amro, would they be chayiv? Because the Zakei Mamre now rebelled against the entire Sanhedrin. Talmud Lomer come to Valisa B'Lamin Shamokum Gorim. But we see clearly from this Raisa that we're talking about the entire Sanhedrin leaving the Lishkas Hagaz for the purpose of measuring the Eglah Rufa, as we saw in Rav Yosef, according to Rav Elazar and Yaakov. However, the Mishnah says Nimtza Tamun Begal Otolui Be'ilan. So then there's no din of Eglah Rufa. Lemas Nisin Rav Yehudi v'lo Rabbana. The Sanya we learned in a Raisa. V'shachachta Omer Basodeh. Prat Litamun. What does that mean? So there's a mitzvah of shichacha. If you forget grains in the field, then you have to let them be there for the aniyim. Prat l'tamu. Those grains of tfuah that are covered are mufka from the mitzvah of shichacha. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. L'chachomim bas sadeh, l'rabos l'satamu. Bas sadeh means anywhere in the sadeh, even if they're covered up. And in the Parsha of Eglah Rufa, it says ba adama. And we exclude from the pasuk ba adama the case of a covered corpse. It was buried under an avalanche of rocks. And that would have to reflect the Shita Rabbi Yehuda that the ba adama means it's got to be covered. It's got to be exposed rather than covered. Ba adama. Omar Rava filu temer rabbanon. Even though in the case of shichacha, the rabbanon say that bas sadeh includes even tamun, l'rabos satamun. In the pasuk of Eglah Rufa, we look at the context, and in the pasuk of Shicha, we look at the context. Here, in the context of the pasuk in Eglah Rufa, it says ki motzei chalal. When you find the dead body, heicha de mishtaka, meaning normally where will it be found? Well, the implication is that an Eglah Rufa is ki motzei. Ki motzei doesn't mean where it's normally found, but where it can be found. Ki yi motzei. And therefore, at this point, if not for the word ba'adama, I would include even if the corpse was under a pile of stones. But ba'adama, and we have the extra bays, is prat l'tamun. It's now coming to exclude that which is covered. And this is something that even the Rabbanan could accept. For Hasa Minyani the Kra, but in the case of Shichacha, if we look at the context of the pasuk, it says Ki tiktzar ktsircha bisadecha b'shachachta omer. So it starts with the word katzir, like that which you harvested, and then it goes on to the word bisadecha v'shachachta. So what's the equation here? Ma kotzer begalui, afshicha begalui. Kotzer is something that's exposed. And therefore, shichacha, at the end of this pasuk, Shachat Omer, also refers specifically to something that is exposed. But if you had covered shichacha, it would not generate a chiyuv of matnas adiyim. Now the base is coming as a ribui to be marba the tamun, and that's the shita of the chachamim. And Rabbi Yehuda who rejects the sheet of the Chachamim, he holds that a covered tfua is mufka from shichacha, and he derives this from bas sadeh or bis sadecha. So the Gemara now wants to know why do we need this drasha in the light of Rav's statement that we just simply look at the context of the pasuk? And the context of the pasuk seems to speak exclusively of uncovered sheaves because it says ktsir. The Gemara answers Rabbi Yehuda Nami. This is the Gemara's kasha. Rabbi Yehuda Nami Tepikle Mishicha Dumya de Katsir. Right? Why does he need the pasuk of Bis Sadecha? Why does he just derive it the way the Rabbanan derive it from Katsir, Dumya de Katsir? Enochi Nami, Rabbi Yehuda, in fact, does not derive it from Basada, but rather from the equation to Katsir, like the Rabbanan, Velo Basada Lomali. So what is Rabbi Yehuda going to do with the word Basada? He needs it to include the law of shichacha in the case of a portion of the field that hasn't been cut down. So he's collecting from the field and he passes over or forgets one uncut standing produce. And on the field is teaching us that he's not allowed to go back and cut down that grain because it's forbidden for him. It's designated for the aniyim. For Rabbanan shichas kama minole, how do they know that even if the sheaves are standing, there's still a chiyuv of shichacha nafka lo? They derive it from ki tiktzar ktsircha b'sadcha v'shachachta. When you reap your harvest in your field and you forget, so it says bis sadcha and it says v'shachachta. Even if one forgets part of his field and leaves it uncut, it's still considered shichacha. And then the Gemara is going to ask why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't use it and derive it in the same way. All right, then this is where we're going to stop for today. And I apologize and thank you for being able to.
No problem.
Okay, great. Let's have a great.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Okay.